to Beware of Spoilers. I am Adam. I'm attempting to negotiate my way out of my driveway right now. Please bear with me. I am tired. I have watched the newest episode of the Book of Boba Fett. Not terrible. But again, we have this similar issue that I've been encountering all through this show. And it is that the Book of Boba Fett, thus far, has been at its strongest when Boba Fett is not present. And I think that's a problem. That is a fundamental problem that this show has, where we, as an audience, we should be able to watch, the Book of Boba Fett and get a good story out of Boba Fett. It's a spin-off. It is spinning out of, if you want to get technical, I guess episode 5 and 6, but really out of The Mandalorian. But as a viewer, we shouldn't have to sit here and be like, well, in this episode, we have 2 episodes of Mandalorian backstory. That's important, not to this show, but to Season 3 of The Mandalorian. Because that's the thing, is we're getting to the point now where we're fighting the Pike Syndicate. And that's how we're going to be doing this in the next episode, which is the finale. That's what we're going to be dealing with, is the Pike Syndicate. They're the ones we're going to try and defeat. And Boba Fett has recruited, Mando, and then Mando goes out to try and recruit Cobb Vanth. And I think Cobb Vanth was the least gratuitous of the cameos this week. I completely understand why Cobb Vanth was there. And it's always a treat to see Timothy Olyphant. He's great on the show. I love the way he plays Cobb Vanth. And it feels very Western when they do that. And it works within the confines of the show. I think that, with all of this kind of, happening, I can understand that subplot, and then, Cad Bane showing up to deal with, what's his name? Cobb Vanth. I understand that, and I think that that's cool that they're doing that, but I like all the Luke Skywalker stuff that they did this episode. I love, bringing it in and showing us him training Grogu and him ultimately giving Grogu the choice. That I think that Grogu, as portrayed, is too young to make this choice and have it be impactful, because he's going to pick to stay with Mando. That's ultimately what's going to happen. Otherwise, he's not going to be in Mando Season 3, and I don't think that's going to happen. I think that they're going to have him in Mando Season 3. I like all of his look at how Luke trains and all of that. It's cool. But again, this is not the vehicle to do it in. I'm not here to watch Luke Skywalker train Grogu. That's not the reason this show exists. This show exists to tell us a story of Boba Fett coming to power in Mos Espa. That's what this show is about, and they don't do a good enough job doing that. By the time we get to the end and they blow up the cantina that Jennifer Beals' Twi'lek runs, whose name I'm forgetting, but, by the time we get to that point, I'm like, I don't give a shit. I really don't give a shit. Good for, okay, that's one less dumb subplot we gotta sit through. Fine. I don't want to watch this. I don't care. It's not interesting. And it's just alright, fine. You killed off, the Twi'leks. Cool. Great. So the Pikes blow that up. And it's look, we're going to get into a fight now with the what's the word I'm looking for here? The Pikes. That's where we're going to be headed, but I don't think that this is really the vehicle to do it in. Ahsoka shows up again. That's pretty cool. It's kind of I feel like it's kind of cool that Rosario Dawson has managed to get that role in 2 separate universes, where she just kind of pops across multiple shows, and it's hey, what's up? Even though this really did feel like an episode of The Mandalorian, it was technically an episode of Book of Boba Fett, so it does show up to kind of be the binding glue across the, the verse of shows, so, cool. Like, cool that they got her to play Claire Temple again, I guess. Like, I don't know. I feel like it is a not missed opportunity or a... Like, that's the thing. It's like, there's nothing about this episode that is inherently bad. Besides the fact that it's not an episode of the Book of Boba Fett. That's ultimately what the problem is that this is it, that we're watching the Book of Boba Fett. That's the show we are watching. We are not watching The Mandalorian. And this episode, again, feels like an episode of The Mandalorian. Hell, Boba Fett has had more lines in episodes of The Mandalorian than he's had in the last two of this show. Luke Skywalker had more to do in this episode than Boba Fett has had in the last two. And arguably more than that, because Boba Fett hasn't really done too much over the course of this show. Like, that's the thing, is like, at this point, we're at this point where it's like, okay, so we got Mando back, and we got, all these things that you love, but it's kind of like the ending of Rogue One being what it is, and people walking out of the theater like, that was fucking awesome. And it's like, yeah, but like, for the first half of the movie, nothing really happens. Like, and I know I watched it again recently, and I said it's not awful. Like, it's not unwatchable, the first half of the movie. It's just kind of slow and plotting and boring, and like, I couldn't tell you why they end up back on the Imperial planet to see Jin's father. Like, I couldn't tell you what happened there. I don't remember. And there's so much that happens in that movie that I'm just like, I don't remember. What the fuck do you want from me? Like, I don't think that, like I said, I don't think there's anything inherently bad about this, but it's just that this is not what this show is. We're not here to watch Mando's story. Mando's story should be picked up at the next episode. Like when we get to The Mandalorian season 3, that's where we should be picking up Mando's story. And you can make the case that it's like, oh well, I'm here. Like we're showing you this, and it's nice. It's like, here's something new that you can see that you wouldn't have seen before, and it's like, you can show me all the new shit you want that's not on target, but we have been off on a 2-episode out of 7-episode tangent now that ultimately does nothing to advance the plot of the show. Like, Mando's relationship with Grogu does absolutely nothing to advance the plot of the Book of Boba Fett. And these could have been the first 2 episodes of Mandalorian Season 3. And I think that had they done a weird thing where it's like, we're going to call this The Mandalorian Season 3. Like, if that's what they were doing, like, this is The Mandalorian Season 3. And it was the first 5 episodes were all Boba Fett centered, and then it's like, and then it ends with, oh, and here comes The Mandalorian. That would have worked a lot better. And then we move on to, a full season 3 of The Mandalorian. I think that would have worked better. And I think that's a better idea on how to run this. But honestly, like, there's so much here that you just watch and you're like, what the fuck? Why is this a thing? Why am I sitting through this and being like, like, it's just such a weird decision, because the thing is, it's like, one of the things of storytelling is, like, to an extent, spread your wings, go out there, tell us, parts of the story that don't necessarily need to be told. Like, all for that, do whatever you think is needed to get us, not from point A to point B, but, like, tell us an interesting story. But, God, just stick to the fucking, like, this is what we're doing. We are telling you this, we need you to be, on board for this. This is what we're doing. And it's like, and now here's a 2-episode tangent about, Mando and Grogu and Grogu going through his training. And it's like, alright, cool, I guess, but it's not going to help me get any further into what The Mandalorian is going to be. And then it's like, we get to the end of the episode where it's like, there's so much that happens here that could have been more concise and handled in a much better way. And had it been, it would have made the episode feel a little bit better. Number one, I don't think we did see as much of Grogu training as they show. I don't think we need to show as much of, as much of, what happens on that planet as we see. I don't think any of that's necessary. And it's not to say that it's necessarily bad, but it's stuff that I don't need to have explained to me. I'm sorry, I really don't. I don't need to have a play-by-play of what's going on in fucking Baby Yoda's life. It's not going to make the show work any better, and even if it wasn't The Mandalorian, I'd be like, yeah, I don't need to see all of this. I mean, I think in The Mandalorian it'd be more forgivable, because it's there's no, at that point, if this was episode 2 of The Mandalorian, season 3, it'd be well, we don't have an overriding plot yet. There is no full, this is what we're doing yet. So, I don't think that that's a thing that, I could forgive it more, but here it feels like we're padding the runtime. And then not only are we padding the runtime, but we're also adding on, adding on nonsense that isn't necessary. That's kind of oh, well, here is this, that at the end of the day, the most important thing is the choice that he's given. After, he has the armor make the Beskar chainmail for Grogu, he brings it, Ahsoka takes it and gives it to Luke, and then Luke gives it as part of the choice that he's ultimately giving to Grogu, and that is, the most important thing that happens in the episode. If there's one thing you're going to take away from this episode, it's that Grogu has now been given the choice to go back with Mando, or to continue training to be a Jedi. And I think that ultimately the decision's going to be, hey, we need him back on The Mandalorian. So, asshole. So I think that it's that's going to be what happens, is that it's going to be this question of what's, he's going to end up there, then what? And then that's the thing. It's because and that's the thing too, it's this constant fucking de-aging of Luke Skywalker. Why does that need to happen? I mean, look, just recast. And I think, I know why they're afraid to. They're afraid to recast because of Solo. They don't want an Alden Ehrenreich situation to happen again, where it's well, why are you recasting? Harrison Ford's right there. And it's yeah, well, Harrison Ford's 80, so, he can't afford, we can't have him go out there and do the same things we would expect him to do if he was even 60. And he doesn't look like he did when he played Han Solo back in the 70s and 80s. So, yeah, we do need to recast, because if you're going to tell a prequel from before he was, Han Solo as we knew him. So, I think that that's an interesting, Sebastian Stan is right there. And they look close enough, where it's people wouldn't be oh, what the fuck? And it's not Sebastian Stan's a shitty actor, or doesn't have many credits. It's we know who Sebastian Stan is, we know what his strengths and his weaknesses are. We just watched him carry a show last year on Disney Plus. Not to mention, he's got a few other movies that he's gotten a lot of attention from beyond Marvel. And I think that it's I don't know, it's one of those, I just feel there's no reason to keep, I like that, Mark Hamill keeps coming back to do it, but it's not even they're using Mark Hamill and then digitally de-aging him. It's they're using someone else's face and then creating his face composite over that person, and Mark Hamill just doing voice work. It feels like the path of least resistance or something like this is to just hire Sebastian Stan to play the role and call it a day. And it's I know it may upset some purists if it's not Mark Hamill playing Luke Skywalker, but at some point, up until this point, they haven't given two fucks about pissing off that aspect of the fan base. So why are we going to draw the line in the sand now? That's well, we're not going to do anything to piss them off now. I think that had they, brought in Sebastian Stan, at this point for this show, I think they have to use CGI composite Luke Skywalker. we've already seen CGI composite Luke Skywalker appear on The Mandalorian. But for future projects, I mean, come the fuck on. Just recast. Jesus fucking Christ. I don't think we necessarily need to have this same guy just sit there. And the thing is, too, it's like I watched Return of the Jedi recently. It's not like Star Wars is new to these mindless hour-long tangents that, you know, are just completely pointless. Like, they could have opened, you know, Return of the Jedi with, oh, well, we're just going to liberate, you know, we've already liberated Han, we don't need to see that, and we can just do fighting the Empire, and it's like, alright, cool. And when you hear what Lucas's plans were more broadly for, you know, the original sequel trilogy that he was going to do in the 90s before he went into the prequels instead, it does make a little bit of sense that he was like, we're going to spend time establishing the criminal underworld a little bit better, because that's what we're going to take over. But now it just seems like we just spend an hour with this, and it's like, alright, cool, I guess, like, can we move on? I don't know, it just feels kind of weird. And it's like the same thing kind of happens with this, where it's like, look, we're going to sit here, we're going to... It's almost as if they know that The Mandalorian is the better of the two shows, and they're like, we just got to make sure that everything is set up for The Mandalorian's return, and then what happened on Book of Boba Fett be damned. Like, it's more important that this happens. But the thing is, it's like, you know, viewership of this has been lower than The Mandalorian, so, I mean, it's not really helping any. And the thing is, too, because it's all surprise cameos, it's not like it's helping viewership. It's like, you know, it's all... No one knew this was coming. So, who would have thought? Like, I don't understand. Like, if they were like, hey, we're trying to get viewership up, so Luke Skywalker's going to be in this next episode, and Ahsoka's going to be in this next episode, and we're going to bring in Cobb Vanth again, and we're going to bring back Cad Bane, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, and it's like, alright, cool, but, you know, moving on. And that's the thing, too, it's like, the issue I have, and this doesn't just go for Disney, for Star Wars, but it goes for even, like, the Disney Plus Marvel shows. My problem is when you watch this and you watch like these shows and they introduce these characters that have a deep backstory among the hardcore fans, the people who go beyond people who watch the movies. And then you're like, here's who this character is. And it's like, oh my god, that's awesome, you brought in so-and-so, in this case, Cad Bane. But it's like, to someone watching, it doesn't mean anything. If someone is just watching this and watched the original trilogy of Star Wars and watched all 9 movies, maybe watched Solo, maybe watched Rogue One, but definitely watched all 9 movies, and then watched The Mandalorian, and then watched Book of Boba Fett, but didn't watch the Clone Wars, Cad Bane means absolutely nothing. And that introduction of like, oh, look who it is, and they don't say his name, and they don't say, like, you know, what he's doing there, or anything like that, it's like, if you don't go into this with, you know, with, like, knowing what's happening, I don't want to say required reading, but if you don't know what it is beforehand, it means nothing. It's kind of like at the end of Loki, when they reveal that it is the one beyond all. Or He Who Remains is what they call him. Like, that character is the one, at the end of the day, who is the bad guy who is running the Time Variance Authority and all of that. And it's this big reveal, and it's Jonathan Majors, and we're like, oh my god, it's Kang the Conqueror. But the thing is, it's like, Kang doesn't mean anything for Loki and for Sylvie and for all of these characters. You know, he doesn't mean anything for anyone besides people who know who Kang the Conqueror is and have wanted Kang the Conqueror as a villain. It's also not confirmed that he's Kang the Conqueror unless you know that they cast Jonathan Majors for Quantumania as Kang the Conqueror. the only indication that he is Kang the Conqueror is when he's talking and he's got this monologue going and he's talking about, all of his variants and all of that. He's like, I was a warlord, a conqueror. And it's like, imagine they didn't announce that, Kang was going to be the bad guy in Quantumania, and they didn't announce that Jonathan Majors was going to be playing Kang. It's like, could you imagine how much speculation there'd be right now about who's Kang the Conqueror? Like, was that Kang? It's like, it seems like it is, but is there proof? Like, is there something to indicate that beyond just, speculation? And it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, it is not good for storytelling if I need to have seen 9 other things to understand this. And it's like, I know who Cad Bane is. Like, I am a lifelong Star Wars fan. I've watched the Clone Wars, I've watched Rebels, I've watched The Bad Batch, I've watched, Visions, I've watched all of this, all of the shows. I've read a lot of the books. I haven't read all the books. I've read some of the comics. These things are cool for people like me. But if you're not someone like me, it means nothing. Absolutely nothing. And it's like, okay, so there's a cool guy who looks kind of like the Pike Syndicate mask. Like, is that the King of the Pikes? Because that's the thing, it's like, he's going to show up, and that's what people who don't know what the show is going to assume. Not, he's a bounty hunter with a history of Boba Fett. And again, you could have layered that into the show. And if we're going to do this whole thing where it's like, and now Mando's going to go out to talk to Cobb Vanth and be like, hey, can we get some assistance to fight off the Pikes? And it's like, okay, so we're going to get the help of these guys and their Tusken Raiders. So what the fuck was the point of us fucking around in the desert for 2 episodes or 3 episodes with Boba Fett? There was no point. If it's just Mando's going to go to Freetown and be like, hey, we're here to, we need help. Can you come help us? Like, I'm just... It's just, there's so many bad decisions on this show that I'm just like, what the fuck? So with that, we'll wrap up for today. We have Peacemaker tomorrow, and tonight we have Moonfall, Roland Emmerich's latest disaster movie. Not in terms of quality, but in terms of it is a movie about a disaster. So until then, have a great rest of your week.